Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 781 News Debrief. I am going to be your host, Jamie Kelly. I am joined with Josh Kastorf,
Hello, everyone.
and I'm also joined by Christine Mackin.
Hello, hi everybody.
There's been a move to increase the housing at Brandeis, the dormitories at Brandeis, and Christine, you attended a thing for that?
Yes. All right. A little bit of quick context. I got a notice in the mail that Brandeis and their lawyers, Connors and Connors, if you watch 781 or the council, you'll see that they are the lawyers for a lot of applications that come before the city council and the zoning board of appeals. They sent out invitations to attend a community input meeting about the construction of a new dorm on campus at Brandeis. At the meeting, I learned that they are not yet in the permitting process. They're just doing some community outreach ahead of time. And they gave a bunch of information about what their plans are and potential impacts, and then had a little bit of time for folks to ask questions. So if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I want to show Google Maps for a little bit of context for folks. I'm a direct abutter to the Brandeis campus. When this goes ahead, there will be a notice sent out to everybody who's an abutter within 300 feet, and it'll be in front of the zoning board of appeals. The plan is for that to happen in about a year. However, Brandeis is doing something that I think is pretty smart, and they're actually putting the new dorm on top of this parking lot that's in the center of the screen right now. It's going right behind the existing theater lot, sort of downhill from the Spingold Theater, in a little tucked away part of campus that abuts Aggregate Industries, which is the rock cement concrete shop that's off of South Street there. So the location, as far as I'm concerned, is minimally disruptive to any residential areas nearby. They're planning on building a pretty large dorm. I think they said 7 stories. Oh, a 5-story building, maybe 6. They're planning on the dorm rooms being a mix of traditional and suite style. And there's going to be 650 beds in that space. Now, I'm still showing the map because I want to also point out that they're not bringing 650 students off campus back on campus. What they're planning on doing is putting up this new dorm with the 650 beds, and then they will be taking all of the students out of their Charles River apartments, which are down here in Charles River and Angleside. There's 375 students there now. Those dorms are going to be decommissioned as undergraduate dorms, and all of those students are going to be moved back on campus into the new location. So the net change, the way they expressed it in the meeting, is 250 beds are moving on campus from the community, and then 375 are going from a farther flung part of campus back onto the main campus. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen while I talk through a few other things. During this conversation, Brandeis gave out some other information about their plans. The dorm is going to be 80% doubles and 20% singles. Currently, there are 2,960 beds on campus. So this is a relatively small increase compared to the total number, but it is 250 people coming from elsewhere back on campus. And then, as I said, the 375 coming out of that existing dorm. They are considering changing the availability of on-campus housing, particularly for upperclassmen. TBD if that's going to happen. And then the last relevant piece of information that I want to share is that they gave 2025 through 2027 as the construction timeline. Once they answered all of the community questions, it seemed like the feeling in the room is that nobody had any substantial objections to this. People just had a few questions about the construction plan and the timeline. So it seems like they're planning to submit it to the Zoning Board of Appeals within a year, and then kick off construction pretty quickly in 2025 next year, and then open the dorm in late 2027 or 2028-ish. So that is the information I have. I have a little more flavor I can share, but I've gotten the gist of it out, and yeah, that's what we learned.
So just to clarify, you said that out of the students that'll be living on campus, they'll be living in this new dorm. It'll be ones that are like partially currently living on campus, just in a different location, and then other ones from a different satellite location.
Yes, that's right. So the Charles River Apartments is 375 students. Those are being decommissioned. My understanding is that there's no dining options down there, and it's also a significant walk or a inconvenient bike or shuttle ride to get down to that part of campus. So for the sake of the undergraduate experience, they want to get those kids back on campus. And then since they're building 650 above the replacement amount needed, that's going to give them some additional beds to what they said is some additional beds to soak up students who are currently off campus and bring them back on campus if they choose. They repeatedly said they're not planning on any changes in enrollment, but that's what they're saying in 2024. When the dorm is done in 2027 or 2028, we will see if they are still planning on keeping enrollment flat or if they're going to use that excess capacity to enroll more students.
Well, thank you, Christine. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. In the news this month was the appearance of some graffiti on the Fernald campus. Josh, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, thanks. So on the 23rd, the Medford Cemetery Instagram account posted some pictures of a building on the Fernald campus that had some pretty extreme graffiti completely covering the interior, some racial slurs and swastikas and anti-LGBT and pretty much, all the usual targets. And I'm not going to show it, but if you want to see what it actually looked like, you can check out the Medford Cemetery account. So they posted about it and people took notice. Councilor Bradley MacArthur put out a statement about it, sort of condemning it. Former Councilor Paz sent out a email to his email list about it. And then people started talking about it on social media, and then the Waltham police put out a statement in response to it. And the original post was not really attacking the police. It was actually calling on the state attorney general to investigate how the city has handled the Fernald property. But what happened was the various people who helped spread the news, people said things like, so there was part of the graffiti was referenced in several places, Hammerskins, which is the name of a neo-Nazi group, and it appeared to be claiming the building as turf for the Hammerskins. So some of the things that went out said, a neo-Nazi group has taken over this building, and what they mean is they claimed it. But some people took that to mean they were like occupying it full time. So I think what happened is the police started getting calls saying, is it true that there's a neo-Nazi group occupying a building at Fernald? And so they were kind of on the defensive to show that they would have known if something like that was happening. So they put out a statement, which was interesting. It talked about how they secure the Fernald, that they have someone visiting it every day at different times of day. They also have surveillance by other means that they didn't specify. They said that they have arrested or charged about 50 people in the last 18 months for crimes at that site, which is pretty interesting. It does show that they're taking it seriously, but it also makes you wonder, that's a lot of crime on one site that's not open to the public. So at what point is the city kind of contributing to creating this crime by not having it open to the public? So the other thing that the statement from the police said was that when they find graffiti, they document it. And if it is bias graffiti, then they report it to federal state authorities, which I think is pretty standard how local police deal with if something might be a hate group or might be a domestic terror group. They report that to the feds, and the feds told them that there were no hate groups active in this area at this time, which is a little bit alarming because there are definitely hate groups active in our area, and I'll go into that a little more, but it is believable that's what the feds told them. So the graffiti looked like it could have been done by one person. And if you go online and look at sites like SPLC, there's no indication that Hammerskins are active in this area. That doesn't rule it out, though, because there are a lot of groups that are out there. It could be a new group. It could have not attracted attention yet. So there's no proof that it was a group, but it's plausible that there's a group because that's what happened in 2021. There was neo-Nazi graffiti near Moody Street and also near Market Basket, and that turned out to have been done by NSC 131, which is a explicit neo-Nazi group. They were not well known at the time. Since then, they've become much better known. And one of their members grew up in Waltham and lives in Waltham, or did as of about 2 years ago. I'm not sure if he still does. And obviously Waltham police are aware of that. They actually had an encounter with NSC 131, I think, in about 2022. So that's one aspect of the story to process, is what does it mean that there's this graffiti in our community? A few people on social media said, oh, it was probably just some local kids who did it. That's not a good answer, right? Because if it's local kids who did it, that needs to be addressed. That doesn't make it better than if out-of-towners did it.
One of the things that I noticed that I jumped out at me when I looked at this was that I looked at the incident blotter and like just how many calls were just going to the Fernald every month. And I mean, it adds up because it was like 2 to like 6 pulse, and they're not always like logging it every time that they're there necessarily. And I mean, there's a lot of
oh, sorry.
yeah, it's just a lot of extra work for our police to have to do that has to get paid for somehow. And then
and it costs money, and police time is expensive, and surveillance equipment is expensive. So what that means is that it costs money to keep the Fernald closed. And so to transition, there's kind of two things to process here. What does it mean that this graffiti happened? But what does this mean in terms of city politics? And the site was acquired in 2014, but they'd been discussing the acquisition since 2009. If sometime earlier, the site or most of the site had been opened up to the public, chances are most of this graffiti and vandalism and trespassing and arson would not have happened. Generally, graffiti does not happen as much at places that are open to the public. People can report it to the police, but even in the absence of reporting it to the police, it's just not targeted as much. So the point of the Medfern Cemetery post was to ask the state to investigate why the city has allowed the site to get to this point. And so it would not be, I don't mean to say it would be trivial to open it up to the public. It would cost money and time because there are a lot of dangerous buildings. Those would have to be fenced off, and then someone would still have to enforce that. So it would have been a lot of work and money to open it up to the public, but we see now it's causing a lot of work for the police and a lot of money for the city to keep it closed. And the other aspect of the Medfern Cemetery post is this is kind of a very solemn place in the history of disability, and what's happened to it is very disrespectful, and the Nazi stuff just kind of adds another level to that. Since 2021, when we saw that graffiti for NSC 131, they've become much better known, and members have been arrested and charged. The Mass Attorney General and the New Hampshire Attorney General have both sued them, and they got off every single time. So what we've learned from that is you can't rely on law enforcement to take care of neo-Nazis. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But what it comes down to is basically it's not illegal to be a Nazi in America. A lot of people today believe that hate speech is not included in free speech, but that's not what the Supreme Court has ruled. So the response to Nazis in your community is the community has to respond. And that's exactly so there was a standout, which I haven't gotten to yet, although that was a main part of the story. So there was a standout that was organized by Paz and Councilor Bradley MacArthur and others. There were about 20 to 30 people there near the Fernald site holding signs saying like no place for hate. I wasn't there, but a member of our team was. She said it was peaceful. And I think that is the right response to Nazis in your community, because for anyone who saw the hate, they also see that there are people willing to stand up for it. And what would be better is if the graffiti could be covered up, but that would be illegal for somebody to go on the property and do that. So I don't know if that'll happen or not, but that's probably what we've seen with the story from NSC. That's the way to respond to Nazis, is there has to be a community response.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh. I'm now going to get into the council activity for the month of June. And this was a particularly active month because they were doing the city budget for 2025. So there were both extra cutting session meetings throughout like the week running up to like when it was finally approved. And I think on the June 17th, there was a special like session for actually passing the budget, which was a council type thing. And the budget pie chart looked like literally the same as last year's. A budget for 2025 is here, and the budget for the 2024 is here, and it's like the two pie charts are the same. 2025, 2024. The numbers are slightly different, but not in any appreciable way. Anyway, regardless of like how similar this is to previous budgets, the one thing that's sort of consistent is that a large portion of Waltham's revenue comes from commercial landlords, which is like the office and lab space you see by 128. And there's been at least a couple of news stories, and one recently of like sudden layoffs from companies, like one in Waltham specifically in biotech, which is a little concerning considering this is where such a large portion of the city revenue comes from. And regardless of like what ends up happening, this is just more turnover and possibly means that this use is less valuable than people may be estimating it to be. And that could potentially be a problem with such a large portion of our revenue coming from there, which this is how the majority of like city infrastructure is getting paid for at this point. Anything that affects this is going to affect potentially like cause them have to look other places for revenue. And they just finished making it maximizing the homeowner tax exemption. So then maybe they'll lower that. Who knows? Either way, that's a problem for next year. One of the things that then happened in that same session was in finance right after. They had a approval of an appropriation for moving the dual language school to the site of the old high school. This 800K is in addition to another 800K that you'll see later for repairing the building. So the entire cost so far that I've seen has been 1.6 million. Also in that meeting was a appraisal of 7 properties at Upper Main Street, which the mayor had said, I'll put a clip here for that.
Installed, and we have to do something.
Yeah. Well,
Assertively, something, proactively.
interesting, the state is going to do the highway taking layout for the other thing. See, because they want the multimodal center.
But they what?
So the state wants the multimodal center, so
Oh.
the state will be doing the highway takings because that's a highway. But, you know,
Of course,
So,
and they
but
will
normally-
be very assertive
yeah,
in their,
yeah.
I'm sure, in
and
their.
I'm not being wise guy, I'm just saying.
No,
The
I
state has
understand.
the
Yeah.
priority that they want to proceed.
Of course.
And you can't have the multimodal center unless you have the 7-lane bridge. And you can't have the multimodal center unless you have the realignment of Green Street and
Of
Bear Hill
course.
Road, so.
Of course.
So,
And
I'm
as
pretty
we,
sure that's
Mark-
why it came back, because
I'm
now
not,
the state is interested in the multimodal center.
I'm going to make a motion for approval.
In that same day, there was the Ordinance and Rules Committee as well. And there was a special act for doing like healthcare for the mayor, which is like started as a communication from the mayor. And there was a little bit of like history from Robert Logan on this one.
This provision that's at question in there, in every other city in the state interpreted that as meaning that the elected officials got the healthcare benefits. In fact, when this came up and it was challenged by this particular citizen, and everybody has the right to have their position, our law department at the time came up, basically agreed with that. However, I spoke with Lenny Kopelman. Okay, now, anybody that knows Lenny Kopelman Page, which our current city solicitor, worked for many years for KPM Law,
Yep.
which is basically Kopelman, founded by Lenny Kopelman, okay? And when I told Lenny what was going on at the time, and attorneys don't usually, you ask them a question and they usually, well, it could be this, it could be that. They don't usually, they couch it in legal terms and don't overcommit. He laughed. He burst out laughing. He said, "What?" He said, that language is, just what I said, typical Plan B form of government language. It's in every charter in the state. I don't know any city that interprets it that way. So what I'd like to do is to make a request of the law department, since we've got a new city solicitor, to revisit that prior opinion.
Apparently this was like due to someone raising a stink about city workers having health care through their city jobs. And as a result, due to some previous like law department decision, like the mayor just doesn't get health care through her work. And it's actually like apparently like the city charter is said to disallow this as a ruling from our previous law department. And basically the consensus is that no, we don't know of any other cities that do it this way. And this thing that they voted on was to ask the law department to revisit this opinion to see if the mayor, city council, and school committee can actually get health insurance through the job. Which is, yeah, makes some kind of sense. It's kind of a weird point to have been fighting on all this time. So, implementing dumpsters ordinance resolution was also covered that night. And that was attempting to set up a process to register dump trucks operating the city and attempt to raise funds. And this is like a thing that both Councillor Harris and Councillor Logan, which are both like the two South Side councillors, have presented and are pushing as like a rat solution or a way to address the rat problem by reducing the amount of food that's out there. And it seems like a kind of roundabout way, but it makes some kind of sense because their goal is to try to like set it up so that the dumpster hauling companies that are operating the city have to like register with our health department, and then that both causes them to have to pay money to the health department, which gives them money, but then the health department then can say, hey, you, in order to get your license to operate here or whatever, you need to comply, you need to give us a list of your dumpsters, basically, so that then the code enforcement can go around to each dumpster and verify that they're properly maintained and properly emptied. So it seems like a roundabout way, but it does seem like it actually could do something. So I'm cautiously optimistic here. And that is currently in the health and law department to review and hash out an appropriate way to go through with that. Also in this meeting, busy day, there was a special permit that came up for Prestige Car Wash. I didn't catch exactly what they were trying to get done there, but it was turned into more of a situation where the councilors are sort of airing the grievances of the local residents to them. And I don't know if for anyone who's familiar with like Prestige Car Wash, it's like that one that's right on Elm Street and has like a huge like curb cut for cars that are always queuing up. And the chief complaint that Councilor LaCava was raising to them as the ward councilor for this particular area is like both the noise, because these things are loud, you can hear them from coming up the Riverwalk, but also like the encroachment of the two in this picture that I have here, the two vacuums here that are furthest at the end are so close to the curb that they're only really accessible by cars driving up on the curb, which is like not ideal and means that if you're someone like me who walks on the sidewalk through here, you're constantly having to dodge around cars that are just like parked on the sidewalk. And very often they'll be queued out into the road, blocking the road, blocking like the Elm Street Railroad crossing even. It's honestly a sight to witness some days.
There were three major concerns that I want to see addressed in this, and those I'm going to speak to. I do find this to be a minor modification. While talking to some more seasoned counselors and kind of figuring that out, and forward how to move forward with it. But the three major concerns for me as the ward counselor are quite simple. I want to see language in the special permit that makes this car wash adhere to the sound ordinance all 7 days. I don't think that's currently in there, which would allow them to kind of operate outside of that ordinance. So I'd like to see that. would-
That's 8 AM to 10, no operation after 10 PM, the noise.
I don't have all 7
Okay.
days ordinance, I would make sure it adheres to that.
Okay,
There are 2 spots with vacuums that are pretty close to Elm Street. And quite frankly, the only way to get to them are by using city sidewalk or jumping a curb. I'd like to see those removed. And third, and the one we've all been waiting for now is the backing up on Elm Street. I've seen it backed up over the train tracks, all the way up to Carter Street, and that's no joke. We've all seen it.
As near as I can tell, the special permit has been postponed, and it sounds like it'll be showing up after the summer recess sometime in like the fall. All right, moving on to the June 24th council committee council night, which is also a busy night. And this is the last one before the summer recess, so there's been none so far in July. There was like this was mostly just like approving stuff that had already been and discussed in previous like committees. And because they were doing council committee council, they did not have WCAC set up in the Hoover room to actually record this. So I ended up missing a portion of it and then because I was running back to get my camera to set it up to record it. And it was not the best setup. So clip at least a relevant portion from it. But one of the things that was discussed in this ordinance and rules was the viability of the NIPS resolution that the mayor had communicated her wish for in a communication from the mayor. And there was a large back and forth about how viable it was to do something like this. Like, would they have to use a sticker? What would be that kind of idea? Or what would be the idea for like how they would do a deposit system inside one city and not have it involve people from other cities dragging stuff in to get money back?
In fact, I would have been in favor of a ban on NIPS, and I know a couple of communities tried that, and it was found that they didn't have the authority to do that. So obviously, the mayor is trying a different tack. I don't know that any other community has tried this yet, but I do know from being active, for example, I do stuff through the Waltham Land Trust, and we do cleanups, and I go along the river. Often I walk along the river walk, and I noticed that the containers that are discarded are almost never the ones that have a 5-cent deposit on them. So the existing bottle litter for the bottles that it covers is very effective in keeping those bottles and cans from becoming litter.
Either way, it didn't really go anywhere. But then I'll put up a link for here. The state is actually looking like they're going to be pursuing their own deposit system for NIPS. So this may be a moot point. On the in the finance committee, on the 624 council, they approved the expanded scope of work for the new police station. And this is going to be located on the same site as the existing police station, but in a different location within the same locus. There was some discussion about like the positioning of the building and the parking lot relative to the wetland area. But that was in one of the previous in the committees. They were just approving in this one. Also in the same finance committee meeting, they approved the second half of that 1.6 million related costs for the dual language school move to the high school location. And this was specifically for modifications and repairs to the building. In that same meeting, they had a approval for 1.3 million for the Totten Pond and Lexington Street intersection. So commuters can expect more road work happening there in the near future. Picture of the Totten Pond Lexington Street intersection because it's an absolute nightmare. And this is something that's going to be critical for the new high school because and the dual language school move, because now so many students are going to be stuck commuting from South Waltham through this intersection just to get to the high school or to their dual language school. In addition to the Lexington Street intersection road work, There was also an approval for almost $500,000, 452,000 for the Ash Street parking lot. This is the parking lot at Ash and Moody. The city took out a loan to buy this lot, and now we're spending money to finish the lot. The lot has mostly been used as overflow parking for a local church and to store Jersey barriers for Moody Street. So here's a picture of what this lot looked like just a couple years ago. Here's the lot today. For a while there it was full of Jersey barriers, and here is the lot at capacity when it is a Sunday and the nearby church has people using it. And I think people are not, strictly speaking, supposed to be parking on the lot. Well, it's just a gravel lot, but people are using it anyways. That is the debrief. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Christine and Josh, for joining me on this. And until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.